Hello out there, all my friends in booktube land. Welcome to another episode of Tristan and the Classics, and boy do I have a treat for you today. In this episode we are going to be taking a look at 10 absolutely horrendous book covers of classic literature wherein the designer evidently had never read the book. So without further ado, let's get stuck in, shall we? Before I start, I have to give a special shout out to Barb and Isabella from The Font. If you have not watched their videos, you must go over and subscribe to their channel because they are a hoot to listen to. They make some really insightful remarks about books, but they temper it with a lot of humour as well. So that's The Font. The link will be in the description below. The reason that I give them the shout out is because at the end of their latest video, they showed 5 terrible book covers. And it amused me because I've often had a giggle at book covers myself, but never thought of putting it into a video. So here goes, 10 classic book covers which are absolutely rubbish. And stick around to the end for an extra surprise. First up is this remarkable atrocity of Pride and Prejudice done in the style of pulp fiction. Evidently, the person who designed this thought that Darcy was a chain-smoking bad boy who bagged himself a girl from the Bennet family by treating them mean and keeping them keen. At the beginning, Elizabeth Bennet isn't too sure of Darcy when he turns up to Netherfield in a leather jacket and blue suede shoes. But when she sees him revving his two-seater chase around the Peak District and pulling donuts with his horse around Pemberley Lake, she's just won over and she just has to marry the fellow. A cracking book. You've got to love the quote to the side, "Lock up your daughters, Darcy's in town." I wonder how many kids bought this book and were absolutely disappointed with it. It just didn't live up to expectations. Rudyard Kipling's Kim is our next book. That delightful, moving tale of the young Indian boy who meets the priest, the Lama, and goes on their adventure and becomes a spy for the British Army. Or, as this cover designer thought, it was Kim, the knock-kneed, pigeon-toed tattoo addict who stalks the back alleyways of Newcastle upon Tyne with her ear-piercing kit, looking for her next victim. I would love to read a book that actually matches what this says. Can you imagine what Mr. Kipling would have said about this? You can just see the designer right now, can't you? Kim! Oh, I know a girl called Kim. Yes, leave it to me. That's number 2. Thomas Hardy's lovely A Pair of Blue Eyes was almost ruined on release by this faulty book cover. Have you spotted what's wrong with it? That's right. Instead of a pair of blue eyes, we have a blue-eyed cyclops. No, 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 said the editor. We definitely need something else. This is rubbish. So they came up with the next best thing. Yes, this is just the ticket. Kittens, we all know that's what the book's about. 5 little kittens and the mystery of who did the naughty in the corner of the kitchen by the tumble dryer. So that was number 3. You may be thinking these are actually made up book covers. I wish they were, but they are actually covers. They are verifiable as being sold, and some of them are e-reader book covers. But what's worse is the next one, which happens to be one of my favourites. This cover was made by none other than Wordsworth Classics, someone whom I have lampooned about their book cover designs before, particularly Crime and Punishment. But this one almost takes the biscuit. The Iliad. The Mills and Boons version. Yes, this clearly tells the story of the trapped maiden high aloft in the temple in the background. She's been stuck up there a fortnight waiting for a hero to come and rescue her ever since the stairs fell away in a surprise landslide. Little does she know what rugged, masculine, leather-clad Adonis is coming for her. Will they find true love or just a steamy romance? Read it and find out. People say, what did the Greeks give us? I say, take a look at this. You remember the Ladybird classics? I think they were from the 60s, maybe the early 70s, and I remember reading them when I was a child, but this book cover particularly amuses me. It's Rapunzel from the Ladybird books. What gets me about this book cover is, as you know in the story, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, and her saviour climbs up her lovely golden locks to save her at the top of the tower. What is this guy doing? He's just dangling from a ledge. I mean, if he had got that far, surely he could have got through the window. And it makes one wonder whether Rapunzel, after letting him climb so high, is just laughingly pushing him over the edge again. On top of this, notice that Rapunzel is perfectly unblemished and smooth as the day she was born. Whereas, had this man just been climbing up her hair, her cheek would be red and scratched and ruined from being rubbed against the ledge of the window as some maniac with a feather in his hat climbs up using her hair. But what kid is going to notice that? Next up is another by Thomas Hardy, The Wessex Tales. And as we can see, it's a book of short stories from a bygone age when things were simpler and love hung in the Wessex air. The stories depict how bands of rock and rollers and death metal soloists used to visit the pubs, and as I was saying, it recounts those beautiful, lazy, heady summer Devonshire days when slick guitarists and epic bass players used to fill the inns and local public houses of the Wessex countryside with their wailing and shrieking and wah-wah pedals. Ladies and gentlemen, The Wessex Tales. I remember reading Huckleberry Finn a long time ago, the delightful adventures of Huck and his friend making their journey down the Mississippi River. However, one of the escapades that completely slipped my mind was this one, which proudly stands as the frontispiece for the Huckleberry Finn book. I had to rack my brain for a while and then I remembered. Of course, that's the story about the girl with chronic shoulder arthritis who could never get dressed and almost died of thirst because every time someone put a jug in her hand, she emptied it on the floor. This delightful masterpiece is from Vexin Books, who got it into their mind that if they started putting nude pictures on the front of books, people might actually buy them. Do you know they even did this with the Bible? I think it's time for another of my favourite company Wordsworth classics, Dracula. Now, Dracula, as we know, is that blood-sucking vampire who goes about terrorising Transylvania. Not according to Wordsworth classics. Here we find Dennis Dracula, a man with an incredibly low blood count, who is constantly tormented and teased for his looks by the local children. Thinking life couldn't get any worse after the blow-dry accident which removed the top of the hood from his parka and all of his hair, Dennis is now stalked by the press. This is one of the photographs as they've just turned up behind him. If Bram Stoker had heard this storyline, I'm sure he would have considered his own work absolute tosh. But I did promise you something a little extra. I couldn't help myself going through all of these disasters from the art department without thinking, I wonder if I could create some good ebook covers which really capture the theme of a classic and tell its story all in one shot. And so, here are 5 of my own. Can I just say, if you enjoy classic books, classic literature, going deep in them, but also having a giggle as well, hit the subscribe button and please hit the like, as that helps me very, very much. I really appreciate all of your help. Now, back to these 5 book covers of my own design. My first book, and I was quite proud of this, is Persuasion by Jane Austen. It recounts the tale of Anne, who, convinced by her friends not to go into marriage straight away, allows the love of her life to disappear to sea for many, many years. When he finally returns, looking and sounding somewhat indifferent, Anne is determined to persuade him never to leave her again. Next up is that book which caused a massive social movement highlighting a problem in Victoria, England. It is, of course, Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. Oliver Twist is a poor orphan boy who leaves the workhouse only to get sucked into the dark underground of Victorian dance-offs. Sashaying and rumbering through the crowds of London along with the Artful Dodger, who is renowned for his moonwalking capabilities, Oliver meets some epic characters, including Fagin the twerker and Sykes, who can body pop like no one else. Another book I thought it was about time we re-rendered the cover is that 17th century classic, A Pilgrim's Progress. The cover clearly tells the full story of Christian, who leaves his small village and embarks on a journey using a small satellite navigation device which causes him no end of trouble. Will he get to the end still a righteous man? Or will he be told to turn left in 200 yards into the Slough of Despond? Mill on the Floss by George Eliot is an absolute cracker of a book. It recounts the moving tale of the first dental flossing movement in Venice. When one of their leading members gets the floss caught in her teeth, it's a race against time. It's a race against time to get it out. If she can't, dental flossing will be set back by centuries, and millions of people will never be able to smile without shame. Finally, it wouldn't be right to finish this programme without having something by the bard himself, Shakespeare. And that play is the famous tragedy, Othello. Yes, the one where Shakespeare describes that hot game everyone's playing down the local pub, where you have black and white little pieces that you plop over everywhere, trying to turn each line into your colour. Things are going well as Othello and Desdemona pass a bit of time playing the game whilst waiting for the ferry to come in so they can take a jaunt to France. However, when the evil and envious Iago whispers to Othello that Desdemona is cheating, Othello loses it, and it climaxes in the famous scene in Act 4 where Othello throws the board at Desdemona leaving her with a terrible head injury. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please go away and look for some of the terrible book covers that you can find. There are a lot out there. Also, if you're a booktuber and up for a bit of a task, why don't you create your own 5 book covers and share it with the rest of the world? You never know, one of us might be taken up by a publishing house to do their artwork for them. Let's face it, we can't do much worse than some of the people that are already on their payroll. Once again, I want to thank Isabella and Barb from The Font for giving me this idea. And I ask you all to go over to their channel. You will not regret it. That's all from me, and I wish you joy in your reading.